Welcome back, episode 5 of the Legends and Dragons. Chance Burleson.
Jimmy Klaus!
I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to our YouTube channel, who has subscribed to Spotify, and I have been asked now to look into Apple iTunes. So I will be doing that sometime this week. I appreciate the feedback, appreciate the love and the follows.
I should let everyone know that anything on the technical end, on the interwebs, any sort of, that's all Jimmy. I know nothing about any of this. I believe that he only asked me here to be a part of this podcast because I am such a pretty face.
That is true, and I needed a friend.
Yeah,
That's what I needed. Hey, so last podcast, episode 4, go back and listen. We had an awesome guest, Philip, on our show.
Oh, he's the best, isn't he?
So, but you did mention how you were not into sports
No,
as a kid. Do you watch sports now?
no.
So I thought of a story
Okay.
to tell you. When I was stationed at Ramstein, Germany, I used to be able to get really cheap flights out of Frankfurt to Rome, to London, all over Europe.
Okay.
But really London and Europe. So anyway, went to the Sistine Chapel.
The 15th or the 16th?
Well, I think it's the 16th chapel.
Yeah.
Probably for us
Yeah.
here in
Mhm.
Texas. In Hearst, Texas, by the way, Legends Martial Arts.
Yes.
Anyway, so I went to Sistine Chapel and had
That's the one with
had a tour
David
guide.
David and God.
Yes.
Right.
Had a tour guide, and and I paid for the group. And there were little groups. You could have like a little microphone or a little handset
To translate.
to translate
Right.
Italian, German, whatever, all this stuff. Anyways, so I go and I'm looking up at this masterpiece by Michelangelo, and I thought I was having fun with the tour guide
Sure.
because in the group we're looking up, and I said, "Huh, Michelangelo made a mistake." Yeah, I said Michelangelo made a mistake, and so he stopped, and I'm chuckling.
Sure.
Like, yeah. He was like, "What?" I said, "Michelangelo made a mistake. Why does Adam have a belly button?" Adam was never born. For those of you who do not know what belly buttons are, just go Google it, go search. I don't want to ruin it for you.
Yeah.
He was never born. He was created.
Mm.
Why does he have a belly button?
I know why.
Well, he did not like it, by the way.
Oh, he didn't.
He clapped his hands, said, "Dumb English out."
Did he really?
He called the security guards, and I got escorted out of the Sistine Chapel for saying Michelangelo made a mistake.
Really? Because the belly button.
Because the belly
You know
button.
why, right?
What?
That's because God went.
just take a look
Yeah.
at the book right there. Just,
Like
what
the
I
pill.
read.
That's where the
That's it.
whole Pillsbury Doughboy came from. Was him giving him a navel.
There's some good food too, man.
Yeah.
I miss those commercials. Anyway, I thought you'd enjoy that being a
That's pretty good. Yeah.
being an arts guy or stuff. So let me ask you this, because in my family, Mama Klaus and Journey, they're the extroverts of the family.
Okay.
Miriam tends to tell me how I tricked her into. Well, I mean, okay, first of all, guys, I did trick my wife into marrying me. It was the greatest heist negotiating
That's
tactic.
pretty smart. Yeah.
Negotiating tactic on my
Yeah.
part. But she said I tricked her because I don't like. I like people, but I also don't like people.
Okay.
Like crowds, it's not my thing.
Sure.
Right? I mean, I just get worn out. I can talk to a large crowd.
Mhm.
I can present. I do this in meetings all the time. I've been fortunate enough to go talk to congressional representatives and just all this stuff. But afterwards, like I'm out. I pulled the Irish exit. Like if there's a little party or a little gathering, like I leave because I'm tapped out. I'm that doesn't fill me to have the people, like have people around. Like Miriam, she needs the interaction. She needs her girlfriends. Like right now she's recovering from surgery.
Right.
And she needs the interaction. Me, I'm like, nah, man, I'm good. Like I'm good solo. Like, would you consider yourself an extrovert? Because I think of you as an extrovert.
Sure, of
Journey's
course
an
you do.
extrovert.
Of course you do. All right.
But do you get your energy from feeding off people?
So
like
I have an explanation that you're going to be really happy that you heard.
that? Okay, go
Are
ahead.
you ready?
Mhm.
Because what you described as you is me. I'm exactly like you.
Okay.
Okay. So what this is here, scoot your chair back.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
want you
like-
to. I don't want you to rustle
I
up
know,
against
hit
the
the
microphone.
yeah.
You're gonna. Everybody's gonna be mad at us.
I know,
Right.
and plus I can't show my legs because
No,
because episode
no.
1 y'all didn't like
Yep.
my legs.
All right. So it's not as simple as extrovert and introvert.
Okay.
Okay. There is something called an introverted extrovert. That is a real thing, and that is what I am.
Okay.
I get confused as being an extrovert all
Right.
the time because I'm a presence with people. I
Right.
do really well in groups of people.
Sure.
I can manage groups of people, and I'm very outgoing in groups of people. The difference is a true extrovert is actually feeding off the energy of other people.
Yeah.
An introverted extrovert acts very extroverted and outgoing, but they're using only their own energy. And so that's why we get peopled out and we hit a wall.
Yes.
And we have to get out, because the explanation that I use for people, it's like my iPhone is on 1%, and the only way I can plug it in is to get away from people completely.
Yeah.
It's the only way. And so at the end of the day, when I have hit my wall, I don't interact at all.
Right.
I'm completely isolated. It's the only way I can recharge to do it again the next day.
Yeah. No, I used to joke like the Irish exit. You know, they go out the back door and you never see them.
Mhm.
I don't even go. I just go out the front door.
I do too.
Like there are times where people are talking. You know, that SpongeBob meme on
Mhm.
Facebook where he just goes up, just like I'm out.
Yep.
Like
Like Homer
people
Simpson
joke-
into
like,
the bush.
yes,
Yeah, that's me.
People joke all the time like, God, Jimmy's out.
Where'd
He's
Jimmy
done."
go? Yeah.
I used to get texts from like work events, and they were like, "Hey,
Is
Jimmy,
everything
I'm trying
okay?
to." Well, they're like, "Hey, Jimmy, where are you at? I'm trying to introduce you to someone." I'm like, "Man, I'm in the hotel room.
Good luck. Right.
I need my sleep."
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. That's
It's
just
called an introverted extrovert. Now you know what you
extrovert.
are.
Yeah, I'm an introverted extrovert.
Me too.
Like people get and Miriam thought when I was around my friends, I was, I mean, we were
No.
cutting up, we were joking,
And
we
I
were
am
doing-
having
Yeah,
fun.
right.
I am having fun
Yeah.
until I'm not.
Right. And then Miriam was like, "Why don't you want to go out? Why
Right.
don't you want to do this?" I'm like, "I love people, but I just don't."
But not currently. Yeah.
How do you get kids who are introverted onto the mats? Like, because I'm sure that you have kids that just hide behind the leg of their
Yeah.
parent, and so Valdez has he has a great technique that he does. He just goes, and while we're instructing the class, he goes, "What's your go-to move to get the kid onto the mats?"
Well, so first of all, that's a very delicate science, because a lot of times the shy introverted kid, or even adult or teenager, it's not that they're always quiet and shy and introverted. It's that they're currently quiet and shy and introverted, and that's because they're not comfortable yet.
Right.
Right. And so what we have to do, what we do here, is we have a technique that we learned from the Kovars called building rapport.
Okay.
Okay. So if I can get some sort of a connection with this kid, if I can find something to talk about that they're interested in,
Right.
and then they make a connection, then their comfort level. So the explanation that I get, some of my best students didn't get off the bench for a month. They just sat there and watched.
Right.
You know, when you go on vacation and you're going to a place you've never been before, you fantasize in your head about what it's going to be like.
Right.
And then you get there, and even if it's awesome, it's nothing like you thought it was going to be.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so what happens with a kid is their parents are like, we're going to go try martial arts, or we're going to go in here, and the kid's probably excited.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, this is what it's going to be like. And they walk in that door, and it's nothing like that.
And they're overwhelmed.
And so it, like, the culture shock of it not being the way they imagined shuts them down.
Yeah.
And we have to build rapport and make a connection. And the best way of doing that is to intermittently check on them.
Okay.
Okay. You can't,
Right.
it doesn't
Get
work
them
that
on there.
way. It doesn't work that, because I need their buy-in. I need their participation. And they can only give that willingly. It has to be their choice.
Right.
And so create fostering an environment where they will choose to join.
Right.
That's how we do it.
So I teach this with adults, and just outside the mats is anytime before I've gone into a congressional meeting, do a little research, just
Okay.
quick Google search,
Okay.
and I find one thing that we share in common.
Boom.
Just
That's
one
building
thing.
rapport.
Right, exactly. Just one thing. Like,
Mhm.
did you grow up on the coast? Are you a vet?
Right.
What's your favorite football team?
Right.
Did you go to college? What college did you go to? What anything that I can find to connect with that person,
Mhm.
like right away. Like
Mhm.
I do it quick, and that's what I tell individuals, even at work. Just find one thing. Like, do you guys have eyes? There you go. There's your connection. Can you, listen? Do you have ear? Anything, the smallest thing. And I use this analogy because I like the Denver Broncos.
Mhm.
I hope that when I die, the Denver Broncos and some of my coworkers who may be listening are pallbearers at my funeral, so they can let me down one last time. Anyways, all that to say, I tell people when you go into a sports bar and I'm wearing my Bronco jersey, there is a table over there of nothing but they look clean cut. They're probably lawyers or whatever, doctors, and they're wearing the opposing team gear. Or I go over here, it looks like this guy just robbed the bank, maybe just got out of jail,
Mhm.
but he's wearing Bronco gear. They'll go right for the Bronco, right for the Bronco gear, right? It's just finding that one
Sure,
connection
sure.
with it. Today we're going to talk about something heavy. You can go as deep as you want here. Unfortunately,
They call me Chance Oversharing Burleson, so I will
Okay.
go as deep as we can.
and by the way, I just found out that my 7th grade son, his class, has found our podcast.
Fantastic.
So, welcome to Talon's 7th grade class. One of the things we talked about was a few episodes ago conspiracy theories. And so, it's of course, now my son has been trying to write a paper on. I think he walked back, by the way. He walked that back.
Did he?
He was going to do a paper. Well, he walked it back on one subject. He's going to write about another conspiracy that we talked about on for another paper.
Okay.
But anyways, all that to say, last week, one of his buddies lost his mom.
Mm.
And it absolutely just devastating news. I mean, they're 7th grade, Talon's 13. And I remember, when I lost my dad when he was 20, and we can get into that. But I want to ask you a question because I know we talked about a little of your family history on episode 1. And for those who are just catching up, your dad, Pat Burleson, who I only met once, I only shook his hand once. So I've known Chance for about 9 years. But your dad, I Googled, 1964, he won the very first American Karate Championship. Is that correct?
Correct.
So your dad was titled or given the title as the grandfather of
American sport karate.
the grandfather.
Now, he was given the granddaddy of American sport karate by people who are considered the fathers of American sport karate, like Skipper Mullins and Joe Louis and Chuck Norris and the Fred Wren, Jim Harrison, Bob Wall. These were the guys around my house when I was growing up. They were just my dad's friends. I didn't know who they were.
Right.
But he was even before them.
Okay. So your dad was
just one few year, not a whole generation, but just a few years before them.
Yeah.
By the time they were like tearing up the 70s sport karate circuit, which was still bare knuckle, blood and guts fighting.
Yeah.
He was, he had a back injury and he was kind of done at that point.
Okay. So, and I read something too about like an arm wrestling thing with Bruce Lee.
I don't know how accurate that is. I've heard this story too.
Well, I read it yesterday. It had to be true. I found it on the internet.
Listen, the stories that I've heard about my father are like the stories of William Wallace.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I believe
Pat Burleson walked in a bar and there were 400,000 people and he beat him up. And I'm like, dude, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. I always loved going to my dad and saying, hey, listen, I heard this story. And he's like, yeah, that didn't happen.
That's so great.
Yeah.
It probably, maybe some of them did. Maybe he was trying, maybe.
A lot of them didn't happen the way, He said they had to.
Oh, okay.
A lot of Wyatt Earp stories.
How was it growing up as Pat Burleson's son?
Well, I can tell you that that I would say that I'm going to try not to cry, but I got to tell you, I don't care.
This is pretty deep, guys.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm totally secure enough to cry in front of anybody. So my father, I had the greatest father on the planet. And one of the reasons is because I was a nightmare child. I was a monster. I was so difficult to deal with. Just in the process of growing up, I was out of control. I pushed the boundaries. I was all of this stuff, right? And so I always knew three things about my father. One, he loved me more than anything in the world. Two, I was terrified of him. And three, if I pushed him too far or crossed him, he would destroy me. Now, he never did, but the fact that he had that,
yeah,
I love you, but I will crush you.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't hit me. He didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he had that mindset of, I'm going to discipline you and I'm going to be the parent in this situation because I love you and I'm so important, and you're so important to me.
Yeah.
So I never really got that, I don't know, abusive thing. I just wouldn't push him. And if he hadn't been who he was, I would have walked all over him.
Yeah.
I would have walked all over him, So yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, I could talk about the pressure of being Pat. By the time I was old enough to understand who my dad was, the pressure of expectations and all that kind of stuff. But I would tell you that I've done a lot of work over the years, and I realized that pressure was pressure I put on myself. Other people didn't put that pressure on me. Nobody was expecting me to be this, that, and the other because I was Pat Burleson's kid.
Yeah.
I did that to myself because I was a child and I didn't know better.
Where's your mom? I don't think I've ever talked to you and I talked about your mom.
The only thing that is comparable to how great my dad was how great my mom was.
Yeah.
I know that you have been roped in to watching the Titanic at least one time in your life.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. We all know there was room for Jack on the big door.
There was. Yeah.
Okay?
Fight me on that one.
But I should tell you that my mom is Rose. I had the most amazing, still do, she's still alive, the most amazing mother, very loving, very gentle, but so strong. So strong. She needed nothing from anybody. She was self-sufficient and she would help anybody out. Like, she was amazing. And she still is. Yeah. Now, she's in the into the dementia part of her life right now. Now I still talk to her. She lives with my sister. My sister takes care of her because she's retired. My mom still knows who I am, but it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
You see the writing on the wall, if you will. Man. So I grew up in an abusive home.
Okay.
So, and I know that we have talked about this a little before, but I grew up, my old man was in the Navy, and I still remember getting pulled over by the cops because he was drunk. So I think it was my sister and I.
Yeah.
And I still have memories of being in the police station, eating popcorn. I think I had one of the cop jackets on and just waiting for someone to pick me up because he was addicted to alcohol. Later on, I find out that he dabbled in some other stuff as well.
Better living drugs. Through chemistry. Yeah,
yeah, that's right. So I have two younger sisters, and I remember just my house just walking on eggshells because of the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still remember times where I would literally open the door to the front door and have to step over him to get into the house because he was drunk. That's how drunk he was.
Mhm.
And he was abusive, verbally abusive, physically abusive. I mean, just hit close fist, open hand, just. I mean, it was pretty tough. And there were times, and my mom, I love my mom dearly. Thanks, mom, by being one of our listeners, by the way. Love my mom. She's a strong woman, and she took some abuse as well from my dad. She tried to shield us from a lot of it. So when I was 17, so I grew up on the beach or by the water, and so I was a lifeguard early on from like age 15, and then 15, 16, 17, for 3 years I was a lifeguard. And when I was 17, I took my dad's gun because he was a rent-a-cop as well on the side, and I just drove down to the beach. I mean, I was tired of the abuse. I was
Sure.
tired of, I mean, just everything. And people looking from the outside in, they saw Jimmy the lifeguard, Jimmy on swim team, Jimmy, trying to fill the void that I had with girls.
Not seeing the hell that you were living in.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I tried to show. So for you who easily cry, I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't.
my
I had to work my way there.
I'm still working on myself too there. I mean, here's the thing. Like if I watch something now, like a special needs kid, a reel on social media, or somebody who was deaf and is now hearing for the first
Or
time,
your child accomplishing something.
dude,
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this feeling?
Yeah.
Miriam jokes that she needs me to cut the onions because she says I don't have tear ducts, and my tear ducts, if I ever did, it would be like puffs of dust right out of it. She's probably right.
Right.
But when I was 17, I had every intention. It was so much, and I still remember the heaviness. And I still remember, man, just crying out to God on that Saturday. And when I said, God, this is all yours. I don't know what to do because I won't get into the specifics, knowing that my son in the seventh grade class are now listening. But I went to that point. I went to the edge, and I pulled myself back only by the grace of God. Went to church the next day. Man, just been on fire since. And so when my dad died, I was stationed at Altus Air Force Base. I got the word on a Wednesday night. My friend and the assistant chief controller at the air traffic facility were the ones that broke the news that my dad died. He and my family were in Italy. My mom and sister were stateside. My other sister went to Amsterdam to do exactly what you're probably thinking, go to Amsterdam. And my dad died alone. And when they told me, I had no feeling.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even,
Yeah.
wasn't sad.
Yeah.
Like they told me, they sat me down, they told me. I still remember just kind of like the numbness, like
Like the Dow drone drop 2 points. Yeah.
probably like, okay, well, I gotta get back to work.
Yeah.
I gotta go control airplanes. And they were like, no, you're not going to control airplanes. Like I wanted to go back to my job.
Sure.
That was my getaway. And so a few years prior to my old man dying, my grandmother had passed away. That was my dad's mom. And so that took even more. He started drinking even more after that.
Sure.
And then just years before that, when I was 12, was probably the first time that I dealt with loss and not knowing, because it was an August day. I was 12 years old, and I remember my sisters and I in our backyard playing, and my mom and dad came to get us from the backyard and to tell us that my grandmother and my uncle have been murdered by my grandfather.
Mm.
My grandfather shot and killed my grandma and my uncle, and I had no idea. I was like, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do? I mean, on top of the abuse and now this, and then trying to, not get in trouble because I didn't know what would set my old man off. And but for me, that loss though of even my dad, my grandfather passed away probably about 6-7 years ago. That was a little harder on me, but for me, for my parent, for my dad, I felt nothing.
Yeah.
I was 20 years old. The last time I saw him, I was 18. I was air traffic training down in Biloxi, Mississippi at Keesler. So for me, I'm fortunate though to have these stories because I have been able to help individuals along their journey. Right? So
Yeah.
for you, I know that it's been a few years since your dad passed. How did community and how did you get through that?
So this is going to sound possibly morbid,
Okay.
but I have been prepping for my father to die um, a large part of my life. Like I knew that was coming, right? The way it's supposed to happen is we're supposed to bury our parents. That's not a tragedy. That's the natural order of things. We're supposed to do that,
Right.
right? And so even as a young person, I was like, my dad's going to die. Like at some point in my life, I'm going to have to go through that.
Yeah.
Right. And dad had a quadruple bypass. I think it was about 23 years ago, something like that. And thought he had pneumonia, went to the hospital. They're like, no, you're having a heart attack. He's like, all right, well, I'll come back tomorrow. They're like, no, you can't. I'm Pat Burleson, and they're like, yeah, you have to stay. And so we went to the hospital.
Yeah.
They did a quadruple bypass. He was having a heart attack, yada, yada, yada. And I remember how depressed he was because he's like, I take care of myself. I take care of my body. I'm healthy, And the doctor's like, no. You have a blockage because of the shape of the blood vessels around your heart. You should have had this heart attack 20 years ago. But because you're so healthy,
right? Yeah.
That's why it took 20 years longer. But you were going to have a heart attack no matter what.
Yeah.
And the way they described it was some people have straight hair and some people have kinky curly hair. And your blood vessels are like that.
Yeah.
So some people can eat sticks of butter and drink chicken fat milkshakes every day, and their blood vessels are so broad around their heart, they'll never have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Other people's, they're so convoluted and twisted, even with the healthiest lifestyle, eventually they'll block up, right? So had that. We're like, we go to, and I remember crying in the hospital. I'm like, Dad, I'm not ready for you to go, yada, yada, yada. And he didn't. And then a little while after that, he had something else that was a problem. And then he went to the hospital, and the doctor's like, you need to get down here. He'd had another heart attack at Chuck Norris's Kickstart thing in Houston. And they're like, you better get down here, say your goodbyes, right? We go down there. He doesn't die. A few years later, they find out he has this abscess in his guts. And they're like, you better get down here. You got to say your goodbye. I'm like, all right. Coming down there, we're going to say our goodbyes. We go down there, and my brothers and I kind of sat him through the night, and we had some special bonding moments that I won't talk about. And turns out that the prostate cancer that he had ruptured. And he's too old to go through any kind of cancer treatment.
Sure.
Okay. So the only thing they could do was put him on testosterone blockers, and that just slowed the growth. But it was what would end up taking him out.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, and this was in 2021, he goes down there, and it was it, right? In the last few years of his life with his testosterone blocked, and the beta blockers and all that, he was just kind of a wraith, just a shell, because it had just taken all of the energy, all of the everything, And that was hard. We had to go through that. And I remember getting the call that he was in the hospital again. Got to go down and say our goodbyes, which we'd been doing for a decade.
Right.
And they said hospice is coming to the house, and they said it'll probably be a day or two. And that took 9 days. And if I was a cartoonist, I would have drawn a cartoon.
Yeah.
Of the Grim Reaper in the corner of the room, and my dad looking at him going, I'm Pat Burleson, right? You have some other business you can go take care of because we're going to be here a while.
Yeah, go.
And we should all be so lucky to have the kind of death my father had.
Yeah.
He was surrounded He took 9 days to die, which gave everybody that wanted to come say goodbye to him
Right.
the opportunity to come do it.
Right.
Chuck and Gina came and sang a cappella gospels around his bed.
Yeah.
He got an opportunity to seal up some relationships that had fallen apart, where they got to apologize to each other and make amends over the years.
Right.
My mother and him had been divorced since I was 17, and I don't think they had ever really made peace with that. And my sister brought my mother over to sit around his bed, and I got to see my father apologize like a dying man would apologize.
Yeah.
And for that to be okay for the first time. And for my sister and I, because my sister and I lived through this, we know what he was apologizing for.
Yeah.
We know what she was accepting the apology for. Nobody else in the room knew,
Sure,
but
yeah.
we knew. And to see that circle completed and the peace made. Of course, after that happened, I got on the phone with everybody that I'd ever wronged. I was like, I'm so sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah, no,
but
that's good.
Jimmy, I think the thing that I can say, because one of my very best friends just lost his brother, and he's going through this. And we had a conversation Monday night, and I remember encouraging him, lean into it.
Yes.
Lean into it hard.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, like, as much as I love my dad, what can I do in this process? And I remember thinking to myself, I owe it to him to let this hurt as much as it needs to hurt.
Right.
I owe it to him to cry as much as I need to cry, and to feel everything, not to run away from it, not to do all of the things that we'll talk about later in this, to deal with it and to mask that pain. But I owe that to the honor, to honor him by allowing it to hurt me the way it needs to hurt me.
Right.
And I got up in front of everybody in a uniform at his funeral, and I cried my way through my speech. And I've never been prouder of myself than to be able to be that real and authentic and genuine in that process. I still am so grateful that I got the ability to do that the way that I did it.
Right.
I didn't set out to do it that way, but it just felt right. I remember crying out to God, like, how do I need to do this?
Yeah.
And the feeling that I got was, don't run from it.
Yeah. No, that's good. When after my old man died, I was asked to give the eulogy. To give the eulogy for someone that you didn't.
How did you do that?
Oh man! So let me tell you that. So I flew out to Virginia. My dad's body was being flown to Dover, Delaware, and so from Dover to Virginia, or maybe I was. Something Dover was there. I think I was flown to Dover. Maybe I got a ride down to Virginia Beach. And so this whole time I was being asked to give the eulogy. And I mean, I already told you, and with the addiction, with my dad,
the abuse,
man, I hadn't spoken to my dad.
What did you say?
So here's the thing that I know that there's a God, because 3 days before my dad died, I had this dream that in my dream my dad had died, and in my dream he had died from like AIDS.
Sure.
Right? So I woke up, and I just get my bearings about me. Like, that was the most realest thing I have felt. So I went back to bed. I was like, okay, whew, my heart's all pounding. So go back to sleep. Have the exact same dream. So I wake up and I call my dad. And I tell him, and he's in Italy. So I call my dad and was like, hey, Dad, listen. I just want you to know I forgive you. I love you. I just
wow.
But he was hammered.
Sure.
He was drunk. He was drunk. So I called him, and then that's 3 days later is when I got the word that my dad died. So to give the eulogy, it was hard because I didn't really have, and there were some good times. Let me say that it wasn't all. There was some good time when he was not, or when he was sober. There were some fun times there. He wasn't sober a lot though. All I did was I kept turning it back to God
Mm.
because for me, I had my earthly dad who was abusive, who was, all the things, but I knew that God had created me, and the stuff that I have seen and heard about God is not what my earthly dad is.
Right.
Right. So what I try to do for my kids is I remember that. I try to make as many memories as I possibly can with Journey in Town. And I know with the kids here on the mats that we are planting trees for shade that we will never sit in. Will never ever ever. And so that eulogy, when I stood up there, I looked across the people at everyone that was there, and all I did was just speak about the love that God gave me, and that was pretty much it, man. It was like a mini sermon, if you will,
Good.
about it, because it was, and I thank God that I called my dad, because I know me, and I would have still to this day probably been living with the guilt had I never called my dad.
Absolutely.
So for me, my loss, and I'm still trying to work out emotions, right? Because in the military, I mean, they build you up as they want, they tear you down, they build you back up to. So for me, emotions are weird,
and they're fleeting, right? Sure.
I don't know what like what is this? I'll try to joke my way out, dark humor my way out. Yep. I'll just do anything I can to get off that topic to something else.
Right.
And so something that I find important, what you said, to those who have lost or who are currently in the process of losing a loved one, is exactly what Chance said. Lean into it. Give yourself permission for that loss. And like I said, I'm still working. It's been 20, what am I for? It's been like 24 years since my dad died. But let's talk about something that I know that let's talk about addiction, because we have friends in the martial arts world who who are now clean, who have been sober now for years, from alcohol, from whatever. My addiction was never alcohol. My first taste of alcohol wasn't until I was like 24 and I was in Germany. Why? Because the water was more expensive than the beer. And I was like, ein Bier, bitte.
Right.
Give me the beer. I'm a poor staff sergeant at the time. So my addiction was chasing women.
Yeah.
Was trying to fill the void in my heart. Like I was clinging onto, oh, I love you. Oh, no, I love you. I was trying to fill, as I say, we all have a Jesus-sized hole in our heart, and I was filling it up with anything other than what I needed to do. My dad died of alcoholism and drugs. My dad's sister did the same thing. She drank herself into the grave. So was there ever a time that you battled addiction? Especially, you said, with the loss of your dad, right? There was some stuff that you saw your dad apologize. Was that a time that you were like, hey, I'm changing it around, or was it before then?
Oh God, no, it was before then. No. So I don't think it would come as a huge shock to anybody. So I told you what a monster I was as a child.
Yeah.
Right. And, and obviously it started with rebellion, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lie and cheat my way out of this, and I'm going to all that kind of stuff. And I mean, like, I was 10 when I was at my most devious. Yeah. Like I was a monster child.
Yeah.
And so it was in my teenage years that I discovered, and I don't really make a distinction between drugs and alcohol. I think that if you were to take alcohol and take all of the liquid out of it, you would have one of the most powerful sedatives on the planet. Alcohol, in my opinion, is a drug, and it might be the most deceptively devious, dangerous one on the planet, not just because of the characteristics of alcohol use, but the fact that it is so socially acceptable. You don't see billboards with people doing heroin and cocaine,
right,
like encouraging you, come have fun and belong to the group with all of us crackheads like that. You don't see that, but we're inundated with marketing and advertising, and people in recovery, yes, I discovered them early in my teenage years, and I've been clean most of my adult life. I do not drink. I don't use drugs. It's been a long, long time, and that's all the details y'all are going to get on a podcast.
Yeah. Right.
But
Rightfully so.
I will say this: if you or someone you know is struggling and you want to get clean and you want to get sober, reach out to me. I can help, and I know people who can help. But what I have found is that people in recovery so often say, well, I just want to be normal. I just want to have a drink every now and then and be normal.
Yeah.
Jimmy, did you know that like 70% of the people on the planet, for one reason or another, do not touch alcohol at all?
No, I had no idea.
So if you really want to be normal,
right, be not
actually
alcoholic.
not drinking at all is the most normal thing.
Yeah.
But we're led to believe that handling it is something we should all be able to do.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The data doesn't support that, man. It just doesn't, your family torn apart, the abuse, how much of that was alcohol fueled?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Pretty much how much of that wouldn't have happened if he'd gotten sober and gotten into therapy and you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. So yes, I have a great deal of experience, but what I have found is that, all right, whether I was born with addiction or whether through the course of my life I was nurtured into addiction, or whether the choices that I made caused me to have that, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter how the cart got in the ditch. How are we going to get it out of the ditch?
Right.
What I do know is that however somebody becomes an addict, my experience is that is like a cucumber that is put in salt water long enough. Once you stay in long enough, you're a pickle forever. You can't turn back into a cucumber. Yeah. Whether you were born that way or whether you made yourself that way, once you're that way, there's an allergy. It's a physical, mental, and spiritual problem where any use of mood or mind changing substances, whether it's a pain pill from a surgery or whether it's alcohol or whether it's, going to Colorado and trying to the dispensaries or whatever it is, that triggers that compulsion to not stop. So the only thing that has worked for me is the thing that has worked for a lot of people, which is 100% abstinence. That's the only thing that's worked for me.
Right.
And I have had to practice abstinence with other things because I found out that this issue doesn't just revolve around substances.
Yeah.
There are certain foods that I just can't eat.
Yeah.
Or I won't stop eating them.
Yeah. But you did not fight this, if you will, solo.
I don't think anybody can fight anything solo.
Right.
We need each other. Not only do we need, I believe, a belief in a higher power of some sort, right? I'm not going to tell you what you should dig into. That's on you. But I do know that some sort of a belief in a power greater than ourselves combined with an interdependence on each other.
Right.
Like, find your tribe, find your circle.
Absolutely.
Chip has a saying that iron sharpens iron. We've talked about this.
Yes.
And I believe we need each other. And your pain, Jimmy, like your trauma, my pain, my trauma is used, I believe God turns that to good purpose because you couldn't help the people you can help without your story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I couldn't help the people that I help without my story.
Right. And I think about that often. Like, what if 17-year-old Jimmy would follow through?
Right.
All the people that I would have been able to help up until here.
And you were the only one that could have helped them the way you did.
Because of the story, right?
Yep.
So, Roman soldiers back in the day, I know that we talked about you going through the Bible. Do you know that they don't have back armor? So think about that for a minute. The Roman soldiers, some of the best fighting forces, didn't have back. Why? Because they were never going to turn and run. They didn't feel the need for that back protector.
Wow.
Next time you watch, say the Gladiator movie or whatever movie you may
Sure.
see, just keep that in mind as well.
Wow.
Like, they don't have it. Why? Because they continue to move forward. They continue to move forward as a group. Your enemy wants you solo. Your enemy wants you alone because you're the easiest to pick off.
Right.
But when you're in a group and you got that battle armor on, the Roman soldiers, they kept going forward.
The guys that set up the army was probably a smart move on their part too. It's
Probably.
like, yeah, you're not going to turn around. There ain't nothing back there.
Exactly, nothing to protect at all. And I think it is very important. So mental health, and we could talk about this on another podcast. We'll bring some experts along. So I don't talk about it because for me, it's almost, I feel ashamed to even say that I have PTSD from the military days, and I'm getting some percentage for PTSD. I know I shouldn't be ashamed of it, but for some reason in my brain, every time I say it, it's like, because you're weak, right? Because you're weak. If you're dealing, Chance said it earlier, if you or someone you love is dealing with addiction, reach out to this guy. He has connections, he has contacts, he can certainly help you out. On the mental health side, like I said, we'll bring some experts on as well. I am certainly not an expert. I only can tell you my story because we all have a story. Please share your story with someone because you don't know who you're helping with your story. But all that to say is from that PTSD side, the thing that I have loved, of course, with at Excel Academy, of course, it's a smaller school, right? You know that. What I love about the jujitsu side, finding jujitsu for me is that camaraderie. So for me, having the camaraderie in the military, now I have it on the mats with people who are battling. And I don't mean battling like they might be battling something emotionally, but when you're on the mats and you're battling with a great sparring partner, and you're going, and then you're finished the round, like, man, that was good. You guys are and gals are going through a journey together with that camaraderie. So the We Defy Foundation, which I love dearly, is that's what they're trying to do, is because military vets, what I hear a lot is they miss that camaraderie outside the military. So that is what I love about that foundation. But all that to say is you are who you hang out with.
Yeah.
I tell my kids this all the time.
My dad used to tell me that when I was a kid. He's like, you'll catch the fleas of the dogs you run with.
Absolutely.
And I thought he was wrong. He was not wrong.
Right. There's not wrong. If you, 7th graders, you are who you hang out with. Please, if you can learn that now, you can avoid a lot of the hurt and the pain. But guess what? If you're breathing, if you're listening to this, there's going to be some pain in life. It's just the way it is. But you don't have to go at it alone. That's what I want you guys to get from this. You have people who love you, who care for you, your teachers, your buds. Find some good buds. Your professors, your teachers, the masters on the mats. You have a big village who love you. Find your village, and I need you to do that. To end. Oh, did you want to add anything?
I do.
Yes,
I want you. When we were talking about mental health, we were talking about PTSD. We were talking about loss of loved ones. We were talking about addiction. Right. This has been a very deep episode. Do you know 2 of the most healing things, therapeutic things that can give somebody the strength to get through whatever they're going through that you can hear from somebody else? Me too. When you hear somebody else say, I've been through that too.
Yeah.
I know how that feels, because you don't feel alone. And sometimes when people feel alone, that's the most hopeless that we can ever feel. But to hear somebody say, I have been through something similar, and this is how I made it through, there's a little bit of hope in that. And man, healing is a type of rebellion. Yeah. And like you hear in Star Wars, rebellions are built on hope.
I will tell you something else other than me too. That got me, at least. And I'm proud of
Yeah.
So I didn't. I mean, I knew my mom and dad were
Sure,
proud of
sure,
me.
sure, sure.
I know
It's
that.
not the same as hearing it.
Oh my goodness, let me tell you, man. When our house got flooded a couple years back, I didn't know what to do. Right. I mean, all I knew was get everything out. Try to. It was the weirdest thing. Like I don't even live in a flood zone. Like
Yeah,
how in
sure,
the
sure,
world
sure,
did
sure,
the
sure.
water come through? And so I met with one of the guys from church, and I sacrificed a nice schedule to go back to shift work for the overtime for the differentials because insurance wouldn't pay for the damages. And, I was just trying to keep my family afloat. We were surrounded by a lot of our village was strong. We had a place to stay for a couple months while they were redoing our house, and I meet this guy from church, and we're talking, and I'm just kind of venting and sharing a story. And the thing that he broke me with was, "I'm proud of you. God's proud of
Yeah.
you." I told you I wasn't
Sure.
emotional. Man,
Sure.
I was like, man, I was trying to hold it in. Like, what is this? What is this liquid from my eyes? I was
Yeah.
getting choked up because, I don't hear that. I know that I do good work. Nobody needs to tell me it. I do it, but to hear it is
Sure.
different. So parents, tell your kids that you love them.
Yep.
Tell your kids that you're proud of them. You don't know what that means to them because, like we said, you're planting trees right now for your kids, and you're building them a foundation when you tell them that you're proud of them and that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
So continue. I just wanted to say that. But the last thing I wanted to kind of end on, because this was a pretty deep podcast, and I know that some people were really looking forward to us sharing our story about it. So I'm glad to kind of get it off our chest, if you will. But fear of failure. I want to talk about that for a minute because people have asked me. I'm an air traffic controller. I've wanted to do it since the Boy Scouts introduced me to it. So I didn't know anything else. I left the house after graduation, didn't look back. There was no option for me. Like if I fail, I'm not going back to that. Like there's no way. And so everything that I've done is either stepped out in faith or just going like I'm like a Roman soldier, man. I'm going. I'm not turning around. I can't fail. But I have failed at times,
Sure.
which I'm thankful for because it has built me to what I am today. There's a lot of people who are on the sidelines that are afraid to get into game, whether it's martial arts, whether it's work, whether it's whatever life, right? They're afraid to get into the game. What words would you give somebody that's afraid to step on, say, the mats, or afraid to take that job, or afraid to move if they need to, or afraid to cut people out of their life? What would if I came to you and go, Chance, I'm really scared to get on the mats, man. I'm afraid to fail. I don't want people to see me fail. What would you tell me?
You know those mazes?
Which
like
one-
a
which
maze,
ones?
like in
Yeah.
a newspaper or whatever. Like it's a puzzle.
Right.
It's a maze, right? Here's the problem with our definition of failure. Okay? Our definition of failure needs to change. Failure is refusing to attempt. That's failure. Not getting off the bench, not trying that new thing, not getting on the mat, not picking the instrument back up, like not doing the thing that you know in your heart you want to do, not trying is failure. That's the only way you can fail.
Right. Yeah.
Because
That's good.
once you start trying, you have started the maze. The problem is that people think that when they run into a dead end, that's failure. No, that's part of the maze. Our sparring guy that has redefined the way we spar here, because we've changed the way we fight here.
Yes.
We don't, no blood on the floor, no beating each other up, giving each other concussions. We don't do that anymore.
Right.
It was my buddy in Boston named Christopher Rappold, and you know what he called sparring? Advanced problem solving. That's what else is grappling.
Yeah, that's
okay?
Exactly right.
So if you're grappling and you get submitted, which I know has happened, Is that failure?
No.
Okay. Not putting the gi on was failure.
Right.
Getting submitted is you learning advanced problem solving. Now, here's the thing, Jimmy. This is why I love martial arts so much. It is helping me develop a skill that I'm going to need in every other area of my life.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yes.
constantly doing advanced problems. Okay, that doesn't work.
Right.
All right, well, let's back out and let's try this way.
Right.
If I'm not able to do that, I'm never going to get anything done. I'm not
Sure.
even going to have any kind of a life.
Right. And one of the things that martial arts has taught me, fighting, this sparring has taught me, is even in negotiations, when I go into negotiations at work or wherever, is if my first attack isn't working, change the angle.
Yes.
Change the angle.
Yes.
I didn't really, and I knew it, but when I'm fighting and I keep throwing that jab, and that jab just keeps going into, that's foolish. I keep doing the same thing over and over.
Right.
But if I just offset it just a little
And
bit,
change the angle.
just change the
Yeah.
angle, now I'm there for the
Yeah.
opening, right? I would, being on the mats and being in that fire day after day after day after day, you can do that in meetings. You can do that
Mhm.
with your family. You can do that with
You're going to need
anything.
to.
You have to,
Yeah.
because life is as I said, parents and kids that you're listening, you parents raise your kids, because if not, the world's going to raise them.
You're not
for
going to like
you,
the result.
You're not going to like it, right? They'll quit. I mean, you know what's going on in the world. I don't have to tell you. But if you give your kids the opportunity to be put in the fight and to change the angle and to continue to advance problem
To
solve,
learn advanced problem
I
solving.
love that. I love.
We used to
advanced
have a
problem solving.
sign above the back door that said, "To lose is to gain."
Right. I like that. Yeah, I think it's good, man. Good podcast today.
Yeah, it was good.
Man. It was good to.
You
rebut
look
some of
you
the
look
moves.
very handsome today.
No, I appreciate it. I think it's probably the sunlight that's coming
Yep.
through. But yeah, guys, episode 5. Listen, again at the beginning, I said I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to just two guys ramble
Right.
on about stuff. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for listening to the Spotify. I'll try to get the iTunes account going. Again, here's the QR code. Go check out the store that Chance has built up. They're some pretty good swag.
Send me some ideas for Legends and Dragons swag, and I'll make some.
Oh, I think, yeah, do that too. Later on in future podcasts, I know I was sharing with Chance that we have some friends who want to jump on here as well. I'm really looking forward to them jumping on, because they have some great stories too about their life, about how they got involved, where they are today, some of the addictions that they fought, how martial arts have. We got some law enforcement friends that will be on the podcast about how martial arts has saved their
Right.
life. Dude, it's going to be amazing. But on that note, I have nothing more to say for this podcast. Chance, anything?
I'm not saying anything else.
Guys, we love you. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys on episode 6.